Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Alexander, let's jump into the first one.
First one this morning is coming from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles. Can you recommend a music licensing site that will allow you to continue to use the music even after you stop the subscription?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I think what you'll have trouble finding is sites that allow you to reuse the music you downloaded on new projects. I use Artlist.io in the past. They kind of allowed that, but they since then walked back a little bit on their license. But the great thing is if you publish a thing and give it to your client, then that is licensed forever. You don't need to worry about, I need to take those videos down because I don't have the license anymore. I find that pretty good and pretty competitive. They had an issue last year where people started claiming music from them. They went all out and fought that in court. And now actually in Artlist.io, you can specify channels and videos or even give your clients a link where they can say where they uploaded it. And then it automatically gets cleared. So they even did that now for you.
Alex?
Yeah, we've used Epidemic Sound. It's very much like Artlist. And so Epidemic Sound does the same thing where you basically, as long as you own it when you published it, you can keep it there. Yeah, you won't be able to continue to use that music over and over again if you don't own that license. But you can use it as long as you had the membership when you published it, and I think you have to register that with them. And even then with Epidemic Sound, what they do is they demonetize your content. They don't typically do a takedown on it. So it's kind of a more gentle, they understand the business model that they're inside of. So they do a pretty good job of that process. By the way, if you want to hear some interesting things about Epidemic Sound, but also about Spotify, there's a great article called The Ghosts in the Machine, and it is in Harper's. It's worth a read, and it does an audio read for you. So I was able to listen to it yesterday. It's just all about the machine of how this music is created.
Bill?
I've been doing this such a long time. I've seen so many shifts in licensing models. Once upon a time, there used to be buyout LP discs when I was a kid. And now that they've switched, everybody knows that subscription really does generate a lot more income for a company. So once that bubble rose to the surface, everybody kind of moved there because it was a gigantic revenue generator. I will say that I've been playing recently. I have a big narration project that uses a ton of sound effects. So I've been playing with a thing called Audio Design Desk that's designed to make those cues easier to actuate in real time. And I was reading their licensing model, and it's surprisingly generous. And so what I'm kind of sensing is that people know that people are tired of continuous payments. So a lot of companies are doing good work and trying to figure out whether or not they can still make money on a non-complete subscription basis. So I'm searching out more companies like that. If they're willing to work with me and make it such that once I use the piece in the process, I don't keep getting hit for it month by month, I look at them very favorably because that's what I'm looking for.
Alex?
Also make sure to read the fine print. So when you buy a lot of this, a lot of it has been licensed for you to use online. It's been licensed for you to use in your social media. It's not necessarily licensed for you to use for a TV spot or other things that you might want to use that music for. So sometimes those licenses are a lot more expensive. So yeah, just make sure that you really read the fine print of exactly what do they give you the rights to do.
Next question.
Yeah, Valen in Henderson, Texas. How can I turn on and off a Studio of Insignia Amazon Fire smart TVs with a StreamDeck?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's a little device from Global Cache called a IR learner that basically will blast the either control tower implemented code that you can get from a database of 285,000 different remotes. So this is what the device looks like. It's like $105. So once you've got that code, you can then send that TCP/IP command through a StreamDeck itself. So I have one of these and I use it like that. So the tricky part though is getting access to these codes. If you need a certain code, let me know. I have an account to get into that database. Otherwise, you can go and try and get it yourself, but it's a little tricky to get in there. But that's the device. It's called a Global Cache IP2 IR ITAC TCP/IP converter.
Jonas?
There's a couple options as well. If you want to control them and you, for example, use a Raspberry Pi, you can send CEC commands to the TV to turn off or turn on at certain times. It works relatively well. Keep in mind that if you have any ATEM in the pipeline, that kills all of your CEC signals. You will also kill your ATEM camera control if you do that. And also, otherwise, I would look into, there's a lot of cheap IR blasters. You don't have to go all out with the global cache one, but yeah, an IR blaster will let you emulate it pretty quickly.
And Jeff?
There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, as they preferably say, right? So I can tell you the way not to do it, because I thought I was going down the right way, and it definitely wasn't. So don't use a powered strip like from Casa that has IP controls where you can turn on and off the power strip from relays and such, because 90% of the newer TVs are smarter TVs, and every time you kill power to them, there's a chance that it's going to go into a factory reset. We have some TCLs that are lovely about that. So every time you kill power to it, you have to go through the full setup process on a, 12 of them. So ours stay powered, plugged in all the time, and we have to resort to just using this old-fashioned remote control to turn them on and off. But sometimes the simplest way is the easiest.
Next question.
All Valhus in Austin, Texas. On SNL, they use cue cards instead of a teleprompter. Are they better for shows like this?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, this particular show, yeah, I think so. It's live. It's real live. You've got large casts. You've got a very complicated set. If you've ever seen those pullback shots where they show you what's going on, they have a set here and a set here and a set here, and there's just chaos kind of rolling. So you can imagine that when the actor has to get their lines right, to have a human cue operator who can say, oh, that's a little blocked, let me move it a little to the left, and oh, their eye line is here. It's just incredibly flexible. Plus, they're cheap. They're easy to replace and to make changes at the last minute. So it's just a form that is particularly well suited for that. If you had that same content on a camera teleprompter, in order to get that eye line shift, you have to move the whole camera, and they don't want to do that. So it just kind of works for that, I think.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, for eyeline. I mean, we experimented with this in the early days of electronic teleprompters back when they were on CRTs. For a show like that, where the eyeline isn't into camera except for Weekend Update, I think they do use a teleprompter on Weekend Update. I'm not sure. But for the rest of it, there's the characters are in skits. They're supposed to be talking to other people in the scene. So their eyeline has to be at least in the general direction of the other person, so not into the camera lens. So cue cards, as Bill said, work pretty good. The problem with cue cards is, and I've been on shows with cue cards, when there's a script change and it's a skit with multiple characters looking different directions, you have to change all sets of the cue cards. In other words, there may be 3 sets of the cue cards for all the different eye lines. With an electronic teleprompter, these days that monitors have gotten so thin and light with LCDs that, you could assign one to a person who would hand hold it and put it in the same position that the cue card would be. And then you could electronically change the script at the last second, pull something out, and then have a cue card operator, instead of pulling the cards, just holding up the display and positioning it in the correct eye line. The problem, of course, in a live show is if the teleprompter goes down, the show stops. And that is probably too much of a liability on that show. That's why they stayed with the cue cards. And of course, trained cue card operators occasionally screw up and will drop a card or pull 2 cards at the same time. And that occasionally happens, but usually the cast covers that up pretty well because they've known the skit, they've run it rehearsal, dress rehearsal, so they kind of remember the lines.
Alex?
I think some of it might have to do with tradition. They do it. I think it might have to do with the past more than it being technically better. I do agree with Courtney that there is some chance that the teleprompter would go bad, but the number of things that you give up by going to cue cards over an electronic display is a lot. So I think it's just it's an antiquated way to do it, and a lot of these shows have decided, producers that have been there for a while and decided that's the way they like to do it. I don't think that it adds anything. I think that it's actually one of the things about SNL that drives me the most crazy is the eye lines. Like that they're so off. The funny thing is, I was talking to someone about Phonax. Jack Nicholson has his lines fed to him when he's doing movies with a little Phonak earpiece. So there's no he doesn't remember his lines, and there's no cue cards required because he just has someone feed it in. Evidently, Johnny Depp, I'm told, just listens to music to get him in the mood. But those little in-ears, I think, would be better at SNL than the cue cards.
There is a certain degree that's performative. They also have a live audience, right? So part of the brand of SNL, when you go, for the people that do actually get to show up live, they want to see the cue cards. They want to feel like they're touching the history and connected to that set and to that production. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I've used an ear prompter in the past. It's an interesting thing. Some people can do it, some can't. Be able to hear something and realistically parrot it out. Particularly, I had to use it once in a really technical script where I had to get everything right. And we were at Hoover Dam, and it was just a huge environment, so no visual teleprompter would have worked. Worked out fine. But also, Mickey, I see, put in the chat, creating Saturday Night Live cue cards, and he's got a YouTube link to watch the process. So if you're fascinated about how they do it there's a resource for you.
All right, next question.
Jeff Feely in Henderson, Texas. Two-factor authentication is slowing us down in meetings and client demos. Do any of you have or use a recommended version of YubiKey?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'll answer the question, but my first thought immediately is that you should restructure your pitches and your meetings such that this doesn't actually become an issue. But yes, there's a Swiss company called Token 2 that makes a really nice, very small and pretty inexpensive FIDO2 compliant key. It's NFC, and what I really like about this is that it will store, I think the NFCs are 50 credentials, including pass keys, and the non-NFC ones are 300, which is a fair bit. So yeah, I like them.
Jonas?
We have been using these YubiKey 5 NFC ones for years now. If you do anything serious that involves access to a lot of customer accounts with credit cards and everything in there, it's unreasonable to not have 2FA. If you're getting slowed down by it, one option also could be is with the key, you still will need to have it plugged in and tap it every time. An alternative solution is, especially if it's demo accounts that a lot of people need to use, depending if a lot of providers haven't implemented multi-factor authentication where you can have multiple YubiKeys. AWS now just did that. So Bit1, for example, also allows you to generate hardware tokens so that way you can share them. We use that for 2FA if we need to share it between people. But keep in mind that then you have a higher risk factor but for your demos, that might really help you.
Guy?
Yeah, I'm using the YubiKeys as well, and they're really fast and convenient. Once you get them all hooked in, they just look like this, and you just touch your finger to the thing, and it'll open it up. This is the bigger one that they were giving away for free on AWS accounts a few years ago, but I also have these ones that are USB-C, and they're super tiny, so they're easy to lose unless you just keep it right in your laptop or your USB-C port and tie it up. So that's the same thing. You just touch that little silver thing there. And when you're in AWS, basically, it'll ask you, do you want, for the additional verification required, you could just say, instead of the Authenticator app, you have the security key, and you just click that. And then when you touch that little button, it'll blaze you right in. So it's quick once you get it set up.
Go ahead, Jeff.
We're using the YubiKeys and a couple others because that's actually a pretty big factor thing that we're working on with our Nibis platform, is to make sure that it was easy to get in and out of, and make sure that it was secure. So the Authenticator apps are also in use, but definitely the cost is well worth it if you need to be secure and also have a little bit faster way of getting in. I find the Authenticator apps takes time. So, and if you're doing email authentication, then it always takes time. And so then you have to worry about that. So if you can move them to a device, if that's really an issue in a corporate environment, then move them to a device if you can.
I'll also support the YubiKey. It's very convenient, and I feel a lot safer on the key accounts. The one public service announcement that you have to make when you talk about YubiKey is that you need to buy 2 of them. And every credential you set up on one, you need to make sure you set up on the other. And you need to put the backup in a safe or a safe deposit box or something. You can still get one or something that you're not going to lose it, because if you lose that YubiKey, there's a good chance that you're going to lose access to that account. So you have to have a backup or you might be locked out forever. Your questions, votes drive the show. So if you're in Makana, go ahead, chat. You can ask questions, vote on the other questions. If you don't have access, just officehours.global/join. You'll get the links to get into Makana, Discord, and all the good stuff. Next question.
Gliss Carmichael's asking, has anyone had experience with Licked for licensing music for online content?
Go ahead, Alex.
Short answer is no. So we haven't had any experience. We had this discussion online about what. Make sure you declare that we haven't had any. But I'll show you what it looks like. Went to the website. This is Licked. Now, what they do is they allow you to. The goal there is to let you actually buy more mainstream songs. Probably not always the mainstream songs from a given band, but more mainstream songs for your production. And you can see the pricing here. Kind of, you can say, well, my average view videos, let's say it's 50 to 100,000, and for $28 a month, I can get one premium track. But I can also they have a lot of royalty-free stuff as well. And of course, you can go to having more, paying more per month. And it is similar to what we were talking about before, looking through their website, where they let you, whatever you licensed while you were paying the subscription, you can keep using. But if you want to keep on adding those things, you need to do that. So those are that's Licked. But it's similar to what we talked about before, but the goal is to give them premium tracks. And lots of artists are trying to figure out, how to make more money with especially my songs that aren't the big hits, but are recognizable. And so this looks like another option for that.
Next question.
From the QR code, Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois. Has anyone signed up to get the BI or MIDI B Fx demo? How did the demo go? Did it work for you? Was it cool?
Go ahead, Alex.
Once again, no. We haven't signed up for it, but I'll show you what they look like. This is the MIDI B Fx. These are directional lights, and here's the BI that you can see here. And I don't know if this is an effect or these are actually I guess it's a lot of them all in one place there. So these are a variety of colored moving heads. But at some point it'd be really fun. This would be the one if you see Tlaloc on. It'd be great to get his input on those lights.
Next question.
This one's from the QR code as well. Brian Craig in Toronto. What is the name of the prompter that guy had behind him? I think he mentioned that it was called IV.
Hey, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, some of you may have seen over the last year, I've taken this thing to trade shows and we used it on a cart and wheeled it around. It's basically a teleprompter. It's an all-in-one device. So behind the teleprompter is a webcam already built into the device. So the idea is that you just plug in one cable. So USB-C gives you a microphone, high-quality speakers, the display, and the webcam in one connection. So pretty cool device. They're now shipping. You can visit the myiv.com website and check it out.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington, here on the panel. What's the current state of the industry and 2025 forecast for cloud production?
Jonas.
I think it's important to look at the different levels of cloud production. There's a lot more SaaS-based systems nowadays that exist there. I think the current state is everybody is still trying to figure out synced contribution from on-site to the cloud, especially if you're talking about higher feed counts. The higher tier 1 networks are still doing JPEG XS or JPEG 2000, which is interesting because it's very similar, but JPEG XS has a more expensive licensing. So a lot of people are going back to JPEG 2K. I think in 2025, we'll see a lot more of the higher end broadcasters using the lower and medium end software. There's a lot of movement, though, in building a cloud native switcher. There's 2 or 3 companies I know of that are building a cloud native video switchers That's going to be interesting to see when they release. Agile Live, for example, have really interesting products. Right now, their pricing doesn't scale, and I think that's the biggest problem right now, that old companies that are trying to move into cloud are having real big issues with cloud pricing. And one of the big promises of cloud is scalability and the possibility to scale with OpEx to things that you couldn't do with CapEx. But most of these, like AMP, Grass Valley AMP, BizVector, Code, all of those are still not at the point where you can just easily rent them by the hour, just click start and it's done. There's still a process. And if you look at other big cloud providers like Sienna or OnHertz, Llama, a lot of them also don't do hourly. And what we hear from a lot of the larger broadcasters that they are frustrated with is, if you then force people to do hourly, they say, oh, sure, here's an hourly cost. Oh, by the way, there's like a 20K SLA that you need to pay every month as well to get access to it. So I think there's a bit of an imbalance there. And it's going to be interesting. A lot of our industry is going to COTS hardware, just trying to capitalize on the R&D that the IT industry has. Because the broadcast industry itself isn't big enough to do all of the R&D that is required to scale and be more economical in the future, which, looking at the market, is totally going to be required. But the IT market is so much bigger, so if we can use those COTS hardware to build software-based processes, I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more in 2025. And then at the same time, you also see more people spinning up. Like if you have CapEx, you put it in the front end, you put it in the acquisition piece, you put it into encoders and great cameras, and then you can spin up the cloud really easily and more affordably. But still, like, it's kind of frustrating that still with every vendor you start, you still have to fight about, hey, what about not charging us monthly? What about weekly at least, or daily? So I hope that we see more in that direction, and it looks like a lot of the providers are slowly getting there, but like it's hard to get there when you are an established company, because then all your overhead and your expenses are built on having that CapEx money that you need. So we'll see. It's windy down there, and we'll see where the clouds go.
Now, for those of you listening closely, Jonas did mention Sienna, so I'm going to throw it to Jeff Keithley.
That's funny. That's really funny, CJ. He said it before I could, so I guess he gets the extra points in the big star today. There is a difference in a lot of the companies that and Jonas is absolutely right about that, is they're coming from a traditional, I'm selling a product that's a piece of gear or something that's in a CapEx type of mentality, that I have to sell X amount of products, and that's how I'm everything from, it's not just on the sell side, but it is on the sell side all the way down to the accounting side. They don't have methods in place to be able to talk to, say, AWS or GCP or any of the cloud providers out there and saying, I need a per hour report or a per minute report, as granular as that could be. And that's the issue, is that they don't have that capability to be able to bill it. So they can't give you that per hour or per day or per week even price. They basically can beat it down to a month, but that's about all you can do right now, because that's it's limitations in the accounting side more than anything. So it is going to take some newcomers. I'm trying to find a middle in the grounds, because we're a solutions provider also, and so doing cross rentals and things like that we have been doing in the past, and Sienna does have a rental option, so you can get it down to a day or a week if you need to. It's just not their preferred, because it takes a lot more paperwork to do that. It's just not an automated log in and do it. So that's the biggest holdback right now in the cloud, as far as making it just really blow up. It's not if it can do it or not. We're not having those conversations anymore. When somebody asks us for a POC, I'm like, It works. Here's all our clients that have been working with it for years. Let's just do the job. And that's where we're kind of drawing the line. We're not going to sit there and the manufacturers are doing the same thing. The manufacturers aren't going to want to give you free access to $20,000 worth of software like SSL does or something like that, where the really high end stuff. It's like, we're SSL, we're CalRec. It just works. And we say it works. We don't need to do a proof of concept because we know it works. So I think those times are slowing down. Now it's just time to get down to the nitty gritty and actually do the jobs, do the production. But I do feel like the move is still headed that direction. It's not slowing down at all. If anything, it's starting to pick up. We just got to get the accounting side the most up to date. That's the biggest issue right now still.
Go ahead, Alex.
And I think there's some market opportunities there, depending on the licensing for the different software, of being able to make some of these available. So if you as a company, buy it for a year and then figure out how you deliver that to clients at hourly rates, so that's another way to kind of look at it. And some of the licensing sometimes doesn't work across the board there, but when it does work that way, that's another way to allow people to be using it at the hourly that they want and allow the accounting for the larger companies to stay the way that it is.
Jonas?
And we're like, it's often not like we have the accounting problem. We have a huge sales staff problem. And then you look at the licensing servers and they just don't know what to do with all these computers that have the same CPU ID that look the same because it's all VMs. So that is another thing that we often still run into. And then manual licensing is, if we are building a platform that auto scales, is still a no-go. Like, give me a pool license, give me the ability to just launch it. I don't know, charge me at the end of the month. Because if I need it, I need it. But needing to log into instances to license it is really tiresome. And then the other big trend we're seeing is automation in deployment, because a lot of those larger broadcasters are still, they get an integrator, they build them one system, and then that's it. Oh, you need two? Well, we're going to send you another PO, and it's going to cost you a lot more money. So people are looking for overlay systems now that allow you to scale. And that's the kind of thing that, like, oh, you want to do one or two? That's where scripts help you, because now you have repeatability. And we see a lot more operators go into the cloud. So, like, where I draw the distinction, operator is most of the people that I call operators are multifaceted operators that can do a good job at audio, a good job at TDing, good job at producing. But then we abstract a lot of the complexity out of that. So they don't have to deal with, oh, how do I add this IP address to the VPC? How do I know what NDI sources are there and all that? And we're seeing all of those things finally slot together a little bit nicer.
Alex?
And the other headwind is just depending on, are you doing a single show or are you doing many shows? Even with our weekly show that we do in the evening in the cloud, AWS has now become our largest, or it's about to become our largest expense. And that's just one day doing it, as opposed to if we were doing it every day, we wouldn't be able to keep running office hours. So that's when you have a budget and you have a production and it needs to be turned on once for a certain period of time, I think that the cloud makes way more sense than hardware. But when you're doing it every day or regularly, the hardware, the ROI becomes more complicated.
And Jeff?
Sorry to jump back in on that. I agree with Alex in many ways on that. And I will also add that sometimes cloud is not the answer if the operators, as Jonas also included, is the operators need to be proficient. And if you're trying to bring people that haven't done cloud and haven't had the experience of working remotely, and just take cloud out of it, just working remotely, don't really have good chops in working remotely, that will impact how long your cloud has to run. I just had that experience, and we went probably triple over our cost in our cloud hard costs, and this was for days because we had to accommodate people that were not accustomed to running in the cloud.
Well, but I think you make the point though is a lot of times What we're allowed to do when we have hardware is to do R&D and to fiddle with things and have it sitting there and have it sit around and be able to work with it and think through it in a way where the clock isn't running every time you turn it on. That's I think that one of the things that for Pixel Core, one of the big advantages that we had is I had a warehouse full of hardware, and we would build the hardware and test it all before it left the room or left the building. Before it got on the truck, it was all working, and I didn't have to buy rental gear and have it, or rent rental gear and have it all show up at the venue and then try to figure out how to cobble it together. Everything just rolled in and you just plugged everything in and it turned on. And I think that was the advantage of ownership, in that case. And in some ways, you don't have that advantage in the cloud. I do think, again, when I look at if you took the office hour structure and you said, I want to do a show once a month or whatever, and I just want to pay $20 an hour or whatever that number is to make that work, it's a huge advantage to do it in the cloud. Like it doesn't make, if I want to do one show that's my product launch, or I want to do something like that, it does not make sense to have $50,000 or $100,000 of hardware to do that product. Unless you can hire someone to do that, but it is. But if you're going to do it every day, then you just have to do. It's just someone's got to pull out an Excel sheet and or a number sheet and figure out the numbers before they decide which one is better from a monetary perspective.
You can ask questions 24/7 at askofficehours.global. It's askofficehours.global. It's fast and easy. There's no sign up or login, and all you have to do is go to askofficehours.global and ask away. All right, next question.
Andy Kokendover in Viera, Florida is asking, has anyone used one of these autofocus adapters for manual lenses? Thoughts? He posted a link there.
Brandon.
So to echo Alex on this, I have not actually used one, but as someone who has adapted a ton of vintage manual lenses, I've done a lot of research into these. And a lot of what I'm finding online, unfortunately, the big problem with these style of adapters is the motors that they can fit in that tiny little distance for the flange distance for, an old lens versus like a mirrorless mount. They're just not powerful enough. When you think about the best part of these lenses being that they're the old vintage ones, they're made of metal, heavy glass, and that adapter has to move that entire lens versus a modern lens, you're just moving around a couple really lightweight glass elements. So I think they look really cool. And as someone who loves Sony autofocus, it's keeping me in focus right now. I don't know if I would necessarily use one of these for adapting lenses. I would look for a really, really solid dummy adapter and then just start practicing your manual focus.
And Brandon, I just want to interrupt you for just a second. Can you've only been on a couple times. Can you tell everyone what you work on?
Yeah, so over the past couple of years, I've been working on a couple presidential campaigns. My kind of specialty is focusing on the high volume content output. So essentially utilizing, cinema level equipment. I'm using a lot of Sony cameras. I think they're pretty phenomenal. But basically the things that most people would tend to shoot on cell phones, we shoot them on real cameras, but we've built out an entire back-end workflow to be able to deliver that content as fast as humanly possible.
That's great.
So learned a ton.
We always want to make sure that the viewers know who's there, so they know what kind of questions they can ask. And so that Brandon is, I learn a lot from Brandon. Like there'll be like things that he's working on. He'll send some picture, and I'll be like, oh, I need to get one of those. He's an expensive. Yes. I will warn everybody, Brandon is an expensive friend.
And I only learn from the best.
Brandon was on our Eclipse coverage, the Ohio team back in April, and I will just say he's a joy to work with. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, as Brandon said, there's a lot of important things to denote because it uses 4 little tiny servo motors that change the back focus of the lens. Because the front focus of the lens can be set, gosh knows, anywhere since you're not manually adjusting it. You're adjusting the back focus, which is a little more critical to move. And I might notice, excuse me, if you read please read this on their website. This is a $400 device. And it says, all sales are final. We currently do not offer except refunds once the adapter is shipped. So you bought it, you own it, you can't get your money back. And they outline also in that little list of warnings that they reverse engineered this from Sony's protocol. So they're intercepting the signals that would normally go to a Sony lens or a compatible lens. and are so if Sony changes the protocol, your device may become unworkable. It is USB upgradable supposedly, but yeah, it's not warranted very well. And of course, they warn you that it won't be near as fast or near as effective as lenses that have built-in autofocus on them. So be forewarned, if you have $400 that you don't care about, you could give it a try.
Jeff?
Maybe I'll just be the old curmudgeon in the room, but you can. Sometimes I don't have a filter, but don't use autofocus. Just don't. In any of our productions, I don't care how good it is. Nobody in a professional video environment should be using autofocus. I'm sorry. I said it. That's where it is. Spend the $400 on Starbucks and enjoy life.
Brandon?
Yeah, and to kind of follow up on what Courtney said on that, they are reverse engineering these specs to be able to use the autofocus in it. And so, take it with a grain of salt. Like, these things are only going to be as reliable as you can get with, think about what your third-party lens performance is. Now, while third-party lenses are getting incredible, I know me, over the past several years, I've only used Sony lenses on Sony cameras because that is where I'm going to know reliably I can use autofocus, which I use it in a professional environment pretty often. But I do have to say, when it comes down to it, if I need something to be critical, I will switch it into manual focus and go from there. That being said, the Nikon ZF version of this TechArt adapter, from every review I've seen online, is significantly better than the Sony. I wouldn't really recommend the Sony version of it. There's just not enough information coming through that lens mount. But the Nikon ZF version, I've seen some pretty impressive results with it. People even using it with the Leica Noctilux 0.95 and getting relatively accurate focus.
What, Alex?
And I will say that for interviews, we use autofocus all the time because it allows people to rock back and forth. When they're talking and everything else, and you're manually focusing it, and someone likes to move in and out, and you're talking about not actors or professionals, but individuals that you're interviewing, and the facial focus and the grab is so much more effective than a person trying to follow them along, that we absolutely use autofocus for that environment. And I love using it for this environment because it just keeps on. See, I can just go like this, and then it's here, and then it's here. It's great. It's awesome.
Next question.
This one's for me. I'm about to install a Meross IoT power strip so I can remotely turn off certain lights via Apple HomeKit. Ideally, I'd like to put it on its own isolated network, but that creates issues with access. Should I just give up?
Go ahead, Jason.
No, you shouldn't just give up, but you should decide whether or not you want to deal in the disaster that is HomeKit, because it just has slowly just gone worse and worse and worse and worse. Ubiquiti routers kind of make this stupendously easy. Like, it will create its own UID IoT thing, make it exactly 2.4 gigahertz, give it an easy password, let you lock down MAC addresses. If you want kind of a happy in-between, once you've set up the Meross and done the firmware update, log out of the app, get rid of the app. I've found from my own tracking of specifically Meross that a whole bunch of the data and the telemetry and the stuff you don't really want leaking actually comes from the app and not the device itself. I think it's their clever way of being HomeKit compliant.
Courtney?
Yeah, I don't use HomeKit, but I do use a lot of these IoT devices that are compatible with the Amazon Echo and Google Home. There is a problem with a lot of the modern day routers is because they'll have one SSID that serves a multiband, so it'll have 2.4, 5 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz. And it'll auto switch off that same SSID. And a lot of these little modules that are in these power strips and, LED lights, LED controllers, things like that, that have the Wi-Fi enabled in them to control them, they're all at 2.4 gigahertz. Pretty much all the chips use 2.4 gigahertz. So what I solve the problem, and there's a lot of problems with the handshake because it'll try it'll intercept the 5 gigahertz signal and it can't read that, and the router gets confused. And anyway, the solution was to just get an old D-Link 2.4 gigahertz access point and plug it into my main router. Let the main router do all the IP assignments if you're going to use if you're not going to use fixed IPs, and then just use that 2.4 gigahertz access point. Give it a different SSID and password than your main network, and that way, and just put all the IoTs on that 2.4 gigahertz access point, and then you won't have any problem with it. Trying to figure out whether it's 5 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, 2.4 gigahertz, and it works a lot more easily. So, do you want to just give up? Well, try a lot of things first and then give.
Alex?
Mickey suggested place all your IoT devices on their own VLAN, set the firewall and routing rules to allow the traffic from your production VLAN to traverse to the IoT VLAN, and then allow the MDNS to traverse for discovery. And I would probably not invest heavily if you use Apple products. You probably shouldn't invest heavily in home products right now. So
we're hoping.
The rumors are starting to whip up that Apple's going to start rolling out their own home. The rumors are that they've given up, and so they've given up trying to play with others, and they're just going to start building their own tools, and then they'll all just work, and they'll just kind of there's about 5 or 6 products that are 90% of the industry, and if Apple just builds those, I think that they've finally started to look at that as a target. The camera is probably the first one, other than the speakers. But they're talking about a home control device, and then we're probably going to see a variety of other products coming out over the next couple of years. So this is probably not the time to ramp up. I have Eves, but I'm constantly resetting them. Not constantly, but like every couple of months, you have to do this dance to get them to work again. So anyway.
Yeah, the Merosses are not too expensive. So if you're just getting one or two, just a power strip or 1 or 2 plugs, it's maybe not the end of the world if that $30 or $40 is worth the convenience until Apple decides to get its act together and just dominate that market. But if you are going to get one of these third parties, you got to remember, if it is HomeKit compatible, you don't technically. Jason's comment about the firmware is correct. You would need the manufacturer's app to update firmware on a device. But just setting it up out of the box, I've got a dozen of these Meross little plugs, and I've never installed the Meross app. It just only communicates via the home, which for me is my perhaps naive way of saying, okay, if they've passed the stringency of Apple's HomeKit litmus test, and Apple's letting them put that works with HomeKit on the box, then if all I do is communicate through HomeKit, it's going to not be catastrophic to my network, but it is probably some naivete. So please, Apple, make some plugs. Next question.
Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas is asking, is splashtop too expensive?
Go ahead, Harshid.
So for Microsoft, you have Quick Assist if you hit Control, Windows key, Q, and you're only able to connect Windows machines. So you're left out by connecting to Mac computers. On Real VNC, you have probabilities of probably getting botnetted or hacked. So
with the splashtop, is that isn't the splashtop is specific to production because it gives you that higher color fidelity, right? Isn't that it's not truly just a remote access thing. It's more of a
Right. So that's what I was kind of leading into. So
okay.
When we were talking about Real VNC and some of these products that actually connect you to a computer, what is the reasoning to why you're trying to connect a product? So Splashtop lets you connect to production computers for sure. If you're IT, it lets you do a lot of capabilities of getting into your system a little bit deeper. So as far as sound quality is concerned, all of that, you're getting as if you're working on that same unit. So I think for the cost, Splashtop is offering a better product. So what do you call cost being expensive? It's for, I think, if it serves your needs for an IT installation that you need to get to all your units and it's Mac and Windows, you have something that'll work for you. So some of these other products, they kind of bottleneck you into a corner. So I just wanted to kind of allude to those product names, that there are other products out there, but you will get cornered, and Splashtop has a good amount of availability on both operating systems. So I think that's one key factor.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm in love with it. I'd pay more. Don't tell them that because my renewal's about to come up. So here's the pricing. It's $99 a year for Pro, and I'm on Performance, which, man, at $149 I'm in this thing all day, every day on multiple machines, bouncing back and forth, whipping around, and it's a joy. It's so amazing to be able to have 30 computers that I can just bounce back around and have multiple windows open. So I can have the Mac, the PC, so I could be checking on Resolve. Did this thing output? I could be uploading some files on another one. Once one machine gets slow and feels like, that rendering is, I don't want to use that machine anymore because it's going to be slow until it's done. And I just jump over to a different machine. Even though I'm on physically sitting in front of one machine, I'm controlling, 10 other machines, and they can be cloud machines. The difference with Parsec, if you think that the pricing is high, there is Parsec for $8.33 a month. But where it really falls down is when you need to get multiple users. So you have to have teams, and I believe the minimum is 10 people. So with me, I'm only on 3 people, 5. Jonas is holding up his hand. So 5 users. So it depends on what kind of color fidelity you want, how many frames per second, the sound quality. But I can tell you, if you use something like TeamViewer and then you use Splashtop and you try dragging around in Final Cut or try dragging around or cutting a show in vMix, it's night and day. It's like I said, it's a joy to use. It feels like you're sitting at that computer. I absolutely love it. It's worth every penny.
Jonas?
I think it's important to make a distinction between, are you using this as a freelancer or privately? Maybe it's too expensive then. If you're using it at the business, just think about the threat vector that it poses if you don't pay enough money for it. Like, sure, there's cheaper services. They might have a little sketchy website, but think about you, because one of the great things with Splashtop compared to VNC or RDP is also you can connect to things in another network. To do that, the client that you put on the remote machine connects to the Splashtop servers. I want those guys to be really well paid. They need to make sure that no foreign entity can just simply log into all my instances. And also, I want my money to be the exchange for the product, not the data, not access, not behaviors, not IPs, not usage stats, be the thing that I give them for the money that I pay them. That being said, Splashtop in the world of remote desktop is still relatively affordable, especially if your business relies on it. It's a great product. And one thing to keep in mind is if you upgrade to the enterprise level, there's different versions there as well. So like if you get a technician license, you get 500 additional systems that you can remote into. So like it's not only 10 per user, but there's also different options there. There's the SOS option if you have a large fleet of people that you need to connect into where you pay per technician. So there's multiple scenarios for payment there as well. But keep in mind, like the amount of times I see people risk threats to their company, to their livelihood by not paying a little bit more. Like I really want the company that I trust access to all my machines with to be paid well. I don't want to cheap out on them.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I would agree with a lot of input that the guys have said. I would also say that if you've never paid a yearly subscription to TeamViewer and you think Splashtop's expensive, I was spending a small car yearly to maintain all the machines. We have 100 plus machines deployed, whether they're cloud machines or actually at one time we hit like 200 machines when we were doing big cloud productions, because each one of those machines was a license effectively. And Splashtop's very affordable for our purposes. I've been using it since it began. I was using it to access because it had one of the best looking and best frame rates to be able to use for live video. So I've been using it since go way back, Windows Media Center. That was the first time I was using Splashtop, was to get into Windows Media Center so I could watch video off of Windows Media Center. So Google that. That's how far back I've been using it. And I highly suggest it. I do like it a lot. Parsec is definitely a great product also, but it is a costly product when you deploy it to large teams. And that's where I think Jonas and I both have found that Splashtop hits all the right check boxes. So yeah, it just depends your point of view and where you're coming from, but I find it a deal at that.
If you're enjoying Office Hours, there are a few ways you can help. You can like and subscribe to our channel. Also, you can donate. We're a nonprofit, so if you go to officehours.global/donate, you can check that out there. Or we also have volunteer opportunities. You can sign up at officehours.global/volunteer. And if you'd like to find out more about volunteering, there's a meeting on Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, to find out how you can volunteer. Next question.
This one's from Emily Russo in Mabane, North Carolina. Where do you think M&E is within the Gartner Hype cycle regarding AI and workflow integration?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, we're assuming. I'm going to assume that you're saying media and entertainment as far as how AI is in there. Now, the Gartner Hype cycle is I think a 5 level cycle. You have innovation trigger, a peak of inflated expectations, trough of disillusionment, the slope of enlightenment, and plateau of productivity where everything kind of evens out. And I would say in many cases we're somewhere between 1 and 3. And I think it all depends because things keep coming out. Things keep coming out. We're not in a position where I think in some cases there's still innovation trigger. In some cases there are inflated expectations. In some cases there's disillusionment. I don't think we're at 4 or 5 yet, but I think we're 1 and 3 depending on the product as far as how that's going. I think that I will say that I think audio may be starting to even out as far as how well it's doing that. Imagery may be stills maybe starting to get to that point where they're starting to get into 4. But when you're talking video and composition and so on and so forth, I think you're still in the 1 to 3 range in this environment.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I think the hype cycle beginning curve, that start here and go way up, I think we're pretty up there because there's just still so much hype about it. The traditional Gartner curve goes down pretty low, kind of midway between the bottom. I think for a lot of industries, it's going to be softer than that because I think it's so useful and so powerful and it's so attractive to people. The things that it does well are just so useful that I think that's going to be moderated for a lot of people. I mean, some things it'll turn out to be not useful at all and it'll go way down. But then the average on the back end of it, I think, is going to be pretty true. I think it's going to affect us for the rest of our lives. That's my biggest question right now is which industries, which tasks AI can really be beneficial for in the long run to get out to that last stage where everything is pretty even. And I think it's going to be industry by industry, task by task.
Next question.
This one's from Jonas Daltel in Stuttgart. What are recent use cases the panel has found for LLM and AI lately in their workflow?
Go ahead, Jonas.
It is especially Claude 3.5 has become so vital to being able to pump something out quickly, code or layout wise, or even have this little joystick that I'm building right now that it built the firmware for the Pi for, and then I built a Visca converter for that. But it has been vital for that. But the other thing also is being able to use a model that is able to run Python prompts like ChatGPT and Claude as well, where you can give it data and tell it to analyze the data and give you things back, has been really nice because it then also can explain to you what that data means and back it up with more data that it did statistics on. So that has been really nice, and also cleaning up a lot of data. Like if you give it a lot of dirty data and you just say, hey, give me the gist as clean data, that has been really useful. But yeah, I keep getting blown away by how well it now works for coding, especially if you know how to prompt it and giving it errors or being able to say, hey, I have a client of mine who needs to do something in Linux. Can you print me a simple cheat sheet for these couple tasks in Linux? And it's like, sure, here it is. And then I look over it, make sure it's all right. Then I can give it off to my client. But it has been a really, really nice improvement. And now that they're more current on their knowledge, it's also really nice to have it right now we're in Christmas season. You can ask it for a recommendation for gifts for your loved ones. So that's pretty neat. And also now it is relatively recent with projects on GitHub and NPM. So I can ask it, hey, tell me how I could do this with what projects, what are the pros and cons of each. And it's really great at that. And like, I don't know when I last Googled something. I think that's probably the most scary thing to Google, but it's finding things and then getting to the source information from that as an offshoot has been really cool.
Brandon?
Yeah, same here. The GPT-4o search function has basically replaced Google for me at this point. It's so much faster, so much more accurate, and the ability for it to write out what the explanation is of what I'm trying to search for is invaluable. But bigger and beyond that, we've been using GPT-4o, Claude 3.5. It's a way for us to pull key like highlight level topics from longer videos with the ability to transcribe even, multi-hour long podcasts relatively quickly now. You can just feed that transcript in and say, hey, give me the top viral moments from this episode. And it's pretty accurate at being able to pull those out. And it really just like speeds up our post-production process instead of having to spend that 3 hours plus going through the whole episode to try and find those key moments. And that's honestly been a huge game changer for us.
Jeff?
We've been using it for a while now. We've been doing tracking with our cameras, which is a kind of a variant of that with Mark Roberts motion control. It's not 100% AI, but it is definitely using algorithms, and it's what they call AI. I wouldn't call it 100% AI because you're not telling it what to do and then respecting getting what you're doing. You're pressing buttons to make adjustments and then getting results. In our Nimbus control platform, we actually implemented it to do probably 5 or 6 of the module builds that we were having some challenges with. It cut our time to deliver that probably by a third. I was really amazed at how fast it was able to help us move, over that hump and really get us to where we needed to be. And lastly, our Sienna processing engine is implementing it now that we can give it a prompt and say, I need to build this many frames with these modules doing this function. And we can feed the script into the AI. It'll come back with a script for us just to run one button on, and we can build out infrastructure in just like literally seconds that would have taken us an hour or 2 or 3. So we're finding places for it. You're definitely finding places for it.
Jason?
I hate writing in latex. I've done enough of it, but it really annoys me. I'm slow at it, and it makes me crazy. These are called Dandelion spheres, and they're used for 3D convergence, among other things. I really like being able to simply describe this thing that is already a model, and then just get an equation, and it's just beautiful, and it's right there, and it's easy, and that is pretty freaking great.
Yeah, I always, the writing in latex, I always feel like it's not breathable. You just get,
Yes, it's awful.
Next question.
This one's from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles. Can Brandon talk a bit about the Sony cameras he uses in production?
Go ahead, Brandon.
100%. So the main cameras that I find myself using and coming back to over and over again, I've bought the most of them over the past couple years, is the Sony FX3. I personally also use the Sony FX6 and FX30, but the reason that I keep coming back to the FX3 is the versatility of it. You get basically the same sensor that's in the FX6. You get that nice in-body stabilization, but 3 of the biggest features that I think make these cameras like as valuable as they are is the audio inputs, being that really nice top handle. It allows you to get professional XLR inputs into a mirrorless style camera. The second part of it is the ability to put your own LUTs in camera. So you're not locked into the standard Sony colors that come with the camera. You can build out your own looks. And the cool part about it is, while that's just a monitoring LUT for the camera, it actually bakes that color into the proxy files. So if you're trying to turn and burn a quick 1080p social media video, you can drop that 1080p proxy file in, and it's like ready to go. The third part of it was in their 6.0 firmware update, but they added shutter angle to the camera. So now within, one button press, I have all of the top features I need, from changing white balance, shutter speed, aperture. I can change my IBIS at one button press, and now I can change my frame rate, and I don't actually have to go in and adjust the shutter speed as well. So it means that instead of being locked into 24 frames a second all the time, I can very quickly switch between all my different frame rates and get that overcranked slow motion, which when you're trying to shoot quickly and capture your B-roll, being able to quickly drop into 120 frames a second, it's a game changer.
Coming up on Office Hours, we've got our live-only shows over the weekend. They're in Mukana, so you can all go to officehours.global/join if you don't know how to get in there. But Saturday is a Q&A. It's a 1-hour Q&A like the rest of the week. Sunday's a little different, though. It's our introspection show. So that is our time to talk about the industry, talk about what we're doing on Office Hours, what we like, what we don't like, what's working. So we love that. To our panel, thank you for being here today. It's a privilege to get to spend another Friday for you, another Friday getting smarter, and you're all sharing your life experience with us. Thank you to the back-end crew. All over the world, you all keep us running every single day, and we appreciate it. Could not do the show without you. And finally, thanks to the producers. You asked such great questions. Keep us on our toes. We had so many, we had to send them back. So if you had a question in there, check your notes. You can submit it on another day. Tlaloc traversal today, 25,000 miles. That's 41,000 kilometers, 201 million bananas for scale. We'll see you in After Hours.
Good panel.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
That was a great show.
Yeah,
well done, gentlemen. You guys know stuff.
Yeah. Right.
Jonas, what's the biggest data set that you've cleaned with Claude?
Most of the time, I don't have huge data sets, but I know of people that you give it a sample and then let it walk you through how to clean that data set.
Oh, okay.
Then you can generate the code for that with it.
Oh, very cool.
But
and is that Sonnet or Opus that you're using for that?
It's 3.5.
Remember that monster I showed you, CJ? That data set. I really want to try that again with.
Exactly. I was thinking about that.
Yeah,